you're back. So glad you could join me today because we're on chapter 3 called Bump from David Walliams' The Midnight Game. Now, pay close attention. It does help you to see the words and hear them out loud to follow along. And hopefully, if you're liking this book, look up there and see if you can find a book that is similar to this one that you might enjoy. All right, let's get our adventure started with chapter 3, Bump. The porter wheeled the trolley Tom was lying on into the hospital lift. The old misshapen man hummed quietly to himself as he pressed a button for the top floor. Tom hated being alone with him. It wasn't as if he had done anything scary. He just looked scary. The boy had never seen anyone so spectacular ugly before. Yes, there were teachers at his posh boarding school that were so unfortunate looking they had been given cruel nicknames by the boys, but none of them as scary looking as the porter. There was Miss Rabbit, the Dome of Doom, Mr. Dead Squirrel on his head, the Hairy Gnome, Miss Goggle Eyes, Dr. Octopus, Mr. Clown Shoes, the Dinosaur, Miss Hooter, Professor Comb-Over. Ping! The lift doors closed. The boy smiled at Tom. The porter smiled at Tom. But the boy looked the other way. He couldn't bear to look at the man. He seemed even creepier when he smiled. Those rotten and misshapen teeth looked like they could crunch through your bones. Tom's eyes scanned the man's name badge. Unlike the nurse and doctor he had already met, this badge didn't have a name on it, just the man's job. Porter. As the lift trundled slowly upward, Tom's world gradually began to take shape. Little by little, he began piecing together the events that had brought him here. It had been a blazing hot summer's day, and he had been playing cricket on the school pitch. The boy lifted his head slightly and looked down. He was still wearing his cricket whites. Despite his school priding itself on always coming top in cricket and rugby in the country, Tom wasn't good at sports. The school celebrated all of its sporting heroes with cups and trophies and medals and special mentions by the headmaster at assembly. A boy who much preferred to hide himself away in the corner of the school library with some dusty old books like Tom could easily feel like a nobody. Tom was miserable at school and wished the time away. If only the days and nights would pass quicker, he would often think to himself. The boy was only 12, but he had longed to leave childhood behind forever. Then he would be a grown-up and would not have to do school anymore. The school played cricket in the summer, and Tom immediately discovered the best part of the game for the reluctant sportsman, fielding. The boy would always place himself at the very far edge of the pitch, so far out that Tom could indulge in his favorite pastime, daydreaming. So far out he could daydream the afternoon away. So far out there was little or no chance of the heavy red leather ball ever coming your way. Well, that was Tom's thinking. This time he was wrong. Very wrong. As the numbers of the floors flashed past in the lift, the last thing Tom remembered flashed past in his mind. A heavy red leather ball flying through the air, straight toward him at terrific speed. Thud! Then everything went dark. Ping!
This is your stop, young sir. Top floor. Home of Lord Funt Hospital, Children's Ward,
slurred the porter. As the lift doors opened, the trolley was rolled out. The porter pushed Tom down yet another long corridor before a pair of tall doors banged open. Bang! The pair was inside the children's ward.
Welcome to your new home,
said the porter. Chapter 4. The Children's Ward. Tom raised his swollen head a little to take a first look at what was his new home, the children's ward of Lord Funt Hospital. There were 4 other children in the ward. They were all sitting or lying on their beds. All were silent, and no one paid this new boy much attention. Boredom hung in the still, stuffy air. It was more like an old people's home than a children's ward. In the nearest bed was a plump-looking boy in an old pair of spotty pajamas that were too small for him. He was flicking through a dog-eared picture book of helicopters and sneakily munching on some chocolates he had hidden under his bedsheet. The name George was chalked on a blackboard above his bed. Next to him was a short, slight boy with nearly combed ginger hair. He must have been an operation on his eyes, as they were covered with bandages. So covered, in fact, that it would be impossible to see anything. A tall pile of classical music CDs and a CD player sat on his side table. The boy's pajamas were much smarter than George's, and he wore them neatly with the top button done up. Over his bed in chalk was the name Robin. Across the ward from him was a girl with a bob of black hair and round glasses. Startlingly, she had both her legs and arms in plaster. All four of her limbs were being held aloft by a complex series of pulleys and winches. She looked like a puppet on strings. On her blackboard it read, Amber. Then in the far corner of the ward, away from the other children, Tom noticed a sorrowful figure. It was a girl, but it was hard to tell her age, as it looked as if her illness had weakened her. A few wispy strands of hair sat on top of her head. Above her bed was chalked the name Sally.
Say hello to everyone, young sir,
prompted the porter. Tom felt shy, so muttered, Hello? As quietly as he could with getting away with. Without being told to repeat himself, there was a vague murmur of hellos in return, though Sally remained silent.
This must be a bed right here,
slurred the porter, as he wheeled the trolley over. Expertly, the boy was rolled on from the trolley onto the bed.
Are you comfortable?
asked the porter, plumping a pillow. Tom didn't answer. It wasn't comfortable at all. It was like lying on a concrete slab with a brick for a pillow. Even the trolley was more comfortable. It was stupid for Tom to pretend not to hear the porter, as he was standing right next to him. The man was so close that Tom could smell him. In fact, the boy was sure the whole ward could smell him. The man was rather pongy, like he hadn't washed for quite some time. His clothes were tired and worn, his shoes were falling apart, and his work overall was thick with grease and grime. He looked like he might be homeless. So, this is the world's worst cricketer? Came a voice. The children in the ward tensed and shivered at the sound. Then a tall, thin lady stepped out of her office at the far end of the room. It was Matron, the senior nurse, who was in charge of the ward. Slowly and surely she made her way down the row of beds towards Tom, her high heels clunking on the floor. From the distance, Matron looked like she was beautiful. Her long blonde hair had been sprayed perfectly in place. Her face was shiny with makeup and her teeth were sparkling white. However, when she got nearer to Tom, the boy realized that her smile was fake. Her eyes were two large black pools, a window into the darkness within. Matron's perfume was so sickly sweet it burned the children's throats as she passed by.
You are meant to catch the cricket ball, not header it, said the lady. Stupid, stupid child.
No one laughed except her. It certainly didn't sound funny to Tom, whose head was still throbbing with pain.
That cricket ball left a nasty bump, Madam Matron,
slurred the porter. His voice was cracking a little, as if he was nervous of the woman.
I think young sir should have an X-ray first thing in the morning. I don't need your opinion, thank you,
snapped Matron. In an instant, her face didn't seem that beautiful after all, as it twisted in a snarl.
You are nothing more than a lowly porter, lowest of the low. You don't know the first thing about caring for patients, so in the future keep your mouth shut.
The porter lowered his head, and the other children exchanged nervous looks. It was clear this lady intimidated them all too. With a flick of her hand, Matron brushed the porter aside, and he stumbled a little to steady himself.
Let me look at this bump,
she said as she peered over the boy.
Yes, it is a nasty bump. You should have an X-ray first thing in the morning.
The porter rolled his eyes at Tom, but once again, the boy didn't react. Without even as so much as glancing at him, Matron said to the man,
"Porter, you may go before you stink out my ward."
The porter sighed before giving a brief smile and nod to all the children in the ward.
"Quickly!"
shouted the woman, and the man limped off as fast as he could, dragging his withered leg behind him. Tom began longing to be back at school. The children's ward seemed an utterly miserable place to be. And that's going to do it for chapters 3 and 4. So now, take a look at some of the books that are listed up there that you can see that are similar to this one. See if you can find a new favorite for you. And I'll see you next time for chapter 5, Pink Frilly Nightdress Boy.